The first thing I noticed was the smell. Copper. Old copper. The kind that clings to the back of your throat and tells you the body has been dead longer than it should be. Mr. Garcia's room was quiet, too quiet for a man who was supposed to be breathing through a nasal cannula 5 minutes ago. The cardiac monitor beside his bed was dark. No beeping. No flatline. Just silence. And then I saw his neck. There was a hole where a carotid artery should have been. A perfectly round cavity, torn open with such force that the surrounding skin had collapsed inward, like something had latched on and refused to let go. I remember thinking, very clinically, very stupidly, that no human jaw could make a wound like that. I pressed my fingers to his wrist out of reflex. Years of training don't stop just because your brain is screaming. There was no pulse. Not absent. Empty. His veins were flat, like drained for tubing. His skin had lost all warmth, all color, ashen, gray, as if the blood had been removed rather than spilled. And when my eyes dropped to his abdomen, I felt my stomach twist so violently I had to bite my lip to keep from vomiting. Large sections of flesh were missing from his side. Ragged. Torn. The abdominal wall had been breached, and loops of intestine were exposed to the open air, glistening under the fluorescent lights. No defensive wounds. No sign of a struggle. Just consumption. That was the moment I understood something was profoundly wrong. And then the hallway lights flickered. Earlier that evening, before blood, before screaming, before I learned how loud a silent building can feel, it had been one of the calm ones. Autumn afternoons always were. I'd walked along the river toward the nursing home, the wind carrying the smell of wet leaves and cold water. Mondays were my regular night shift. I never complained. I liked this place. I liked the residents. After years in emergency rooms and ICUs, constant alarms and death rattles, a long-term care facility felt almost merciful. These people remembered your name. I showed my ID at the front desk. Jim, our security guard, leaned back in his chair, watching the sunset bleed orange across the windows. "Beautiful evening," I said. He smiled. "Sure is. Document." Inside, the air was thick with antiseptic and reheated soup. I hung my coat, washed my hands, 30 seconds, muscle memory, and joined the shift handover. Usually it was mundane. Blood pressures. Mild confusion. Who needed help toileting at night? But that evening, Diana spoke up. "Miss Strauss didn't sleep," she said. She kept hearing footsteps in the hallway. I remember nodding, already diagnosing. Auditory misperception. Anxiety. Mild sundowning. "There's a leak in the bathroom near her room," someone said. Pipes drip onto the tile. That explanation satisfied everyone. It shouldn't have. The day shift left. 3 of us remained instead of 5. Understaffed, but manageable. We did rounds. Med passes. Vitals. I spent time in the dining room, listening to gossip about celebrities who'd been dead for decades. Mr. Garcia showed me a scarf he'd crocheted. His hands trembled, but his stitches were neat. Consistent. A man who still had control. Miss Strauss sat alone. Pale. Eyes darting toward the hallway. "They were running," she whispered when I asked how she was feeling. Her fingers twitched against the table. Back and forth. All night. I told her I'd check on her later. I told her she was safe. Doctors lie like that sometimes. By midnight, the building settled. Residents asleep. Lights dimmed. I sat in the lounge reading, the hum of fluorescent bulbs filling the silence. Then I heard it. Thud. Heavy. Irregular. Not the soft shuffling of slippered feet. Not a cane. Something fast. Something purposeful. It moved across the floor above me and vanished. I told myself it was nothing. Then it happened again. That's when I went upstairs. And that's how I found Mr. Garcia. The emergency button screamed when I hit it. My colleagues arrived. We followed protocol. We documented. We covered the body. We told the morning staff he'd passed peacefully in his sleep. But I knew something had been hunting inside that building. And somewhere above us, something was still moving. I didn't sleep after that shift. I went home, showered until the water ran cold, scrubbed my hands until the skin cracked, and still I could smell it. Copper. Rot. That hollow, wrong scent of a body that hadn't simply failed, but had been emptied. By the time evening came again, my scrubs felt heavier than usual, like they already knew what I was walking back into. I told myself I was being irrational. I'm a physician. I've pronounced deaths. I've seen violence. A nursing home isn't a crime scene, it's a place where bodies slow down and stop. That's all. But when I walked past the river again, the water looked darker, thicker, and the building at the edge of the city didn't feel like shelter anymore. Inside, the atmosphere had changed. Residents whispered instead of chatted. Some chairs were empty at dinner, family had come early, taking people home just for a few days. Jim nodded to me from the desk, but his eyes stayed glued to the security monitors. Miss Strauss wouldn't meet my gaze. She flinched when someone laughed too loudly. Her shoulders stayed hunched, like she was bracing for impact. They didn't stop, she said when I checked on her. The footsteps. They don't care if it's day or night anymore. I checked her vitals. Blood pressure elevated. Pulse tachycardic. Anxiety, but fear has a physiological signature, and hers was screaming. That night, the building creaked like it was breathing. Doors settled. Pipes knocked. Every sound felt deliberate. I kept catching myself glancing at corners, mirrors, reflections in dark windows, my brain running threat analysis where it never had before. At 1:17 a.m., the emergency light in the lounge snapped on. Red. Bright. Urgent. Miss Strauss. I ran. Her door was open when I reached it. She was on the floor, backed against the bed, shaking so violently her teeth clattered. Under the bed, she stammered. My glasses fell. I looked. I told her not to move. I got down on my hands and knees. The smell hit first. Fresh blood. Warm. Metallic. Then I saw it. A human hand. Severed at the wrist. Bone snapped, not cut. Tendons torn apart like wet rope. The fingers were curled slightly, as if they'd tried to grasp something in the final second before being ripped away. I gagged and scrambled backward, my heart slamming so hard it hurt. My colleagues arrived seconds later. None of us spoke. There was nothing to say. We accounted for residents. One was missing. Mr. Taylor. No bed. No wheelchair. No sign he'd left on his own. Police came. Questions were asked. Answers were thin. No blood trail. No forced exits. Just a missing man and a hand under a bed. That should have been the end of it. Evacuation. Shutdown. Investigation. It wasn't. The other 2 night staff quit within days. I didn't. That's the part people always judge. But I'd spent my life promising patients I wouldn't abandon them. And Miss Strauss, especially her, was unraveling. She told me the footsteps were closer now. That doors creaked open and shut on their own. That something lingered just outside her vision. And then, I started hearing it too. Slow at first. Almost shy. Heavy impacts moving too fast for elderly feet. Pausing outside doors. Testing handles. At night, I walked the halls with my pulse in my ears, afraid of empty rooms, afraid of corners, afraid of the silence breaking. At 4:03 a.m., I went upstairs to deliver medication. That's when the footsteps ran. And then came the scream. The scream didn't sound human. It tore through the building like something being ripped apart, raw, wet, desperate. It bypassed reason and went straight into my spine. My body moved before my mind caught up. Miss Strauss. I sprinted down the hallway, shoes slapping against linoleum that suddenly felt too long, too narrow. The lights overhead flickered as I ran, buzzing louder with every step, like they were warning me to turn back. Her door was open. I burst inside. Miss Strauss was on the bed, pressed against the headboard, her chest heaving so violently I thought her ribs might crack. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, white showing all around. She looked like someone in the final seconds of a myocardial infarction. Her right arm was soaked in blood. Not splattered. Not streaked. Dripping. I rushed to her side, my training snapping into place despite the terror clawing at my throat. "Miss Strauss, look at me," I said, gripping her shoulders. "Breathe with me. In. Out." Slowly. Her pulse was racing, well over 100. Skin cold, clammy. Shock. Panic. Maybe both. I scanned her arm for wounds. Nothing. No lacerations. No punctures. No broken skin. The blood was in hers. I felt my stomach drop. I looked around the room. The bed. The dresser. The bathroom door. Then I saw the window. Open. The curtains stirred gently in the night air, brushing against the sill like fingers. Outside was nothing but darkness and the faint outline of the courtyard below. I sat beside her, forcing my voice to stay steady, counting breaths until her shaking slowed enough for speech. After 10 minutes, she finally spoke. "It was on the ceiling," she whispered. I didn't respond. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. "It came in so quietly," she said. "No footsteps this time. Just breathing. Wet breathing." Her fingers dug into the sheets. It was pale. No hair. Its arms were too long, bent the wrong way. Its mouth, she swallowed hard. There was blood dripping out of it. I felt ice spread through my chest. "It crawled above me," she continued. "Like a spider." The blood dripped down onto my arm. Her voice broke. It was waiting. For my neck. She looked straight at me. "And then it heard you." I turned slowly, scanning the ceiling. Nothing. But the smell was still there. Fresh blood. Iron heavy. Clothes. I checked every room on the floor after that. My hands shook so badly I dropped my keys twice. I opened doors expecting screams, bodies, something worse. I found the source in the broom closet. Jeff. The security guard. His body was folded wrong, limbs twisted at angles joints were never meant to allow. His arms were splayed outward like something had pried him open. His mouth was stretched wide, jaw dislocated, frozen in a scream that never made it out. There was no blood left in him either. I stepped back, my mind finally cracking under the weight of it all. This wasn't an intruder. This wasn't an animal. This was something that had learned the building. And it was still inside. I don't remember deciding to run. I just remember my legs moving, my breath tearing in and out of my lungs, the sound of my own heartbeat roaring louder than the alarm bells I knew were about to start screaming. I backed away from the broom closet, every instinct firing at once. Fight or flight doesn't feel dramatic when it happens. It feels ugly. Animal. Your mind stops negotiating and starts screaming one word over and over. Leave. I turned and ran. I didn't look down the hallway. I didn't look at the doors. I was terrified that if I did, I'd see something moving toward me, too fast, too low to the ground, crawling along the ceiling like Miss Strauss had described. I shoved the emergency exit open. The alarm exploded into sound, a shrill electronic scream that echoed through the building. I didn't care. I barreled across the courtyard, cold air ripping into my lungs, my shoes slipping on damp grass as I headed for the street. Freedom was 10 seconds away. That's when the guilt hit me. Not fear. Not logic. Guilt. It slammed into me harder than anything else that night. Images flooded my head, faces of residents who couldn't run, couldn't lock doors, couldn't even scream loud enough to be heard. And Miss Strauss, trembling, terrified, alone in her room. I stopped. My legs shook so badly I had to plant my hands on my knees. I turned back toward the building, every cell in my body begging me not to. I looked up at the first floor windows. At hers. She was standing there. Perfectly still. Her silhouette was wrong, too upright, too relaxed. The room behind her was dark, the light above her bed off. Then she stepped closer to the glass. And I saw her face. Her mouth was stretched into an impossibly wide smile, lips pulled back so far I could see her gums. Dark liquid dripped from her chin, trailing down her neck, staining the collar of her nightgown. Blood. Her eyes locked onto mine. Not pleading. Not afraid. Knowing. She raised one hand slowly and pressed it against the window. I stumbled backward, bile burning my throat. That's when I understood the truth. Miss Strauss hadn't been hearing it. She had been calling it. And it had finally answered. I didn't go back inside. I couldn't. The part of me that was a doctor, the part trained to help, to intervene, to stay, was crushed under something older and far more honest. Survival. I turned away from that window and kept walking until the building disappeared behind the trees. The investigation that followed never found the answers. Police reports used words like animal attack and unknown assailant. The nursing home shut down quietly within weeks. Families were told their loved ones were relocated. Files were sealed. The building was condemned. No one ever asked for my statement again. But here's the part that still keeps me awake. 2 weeks after the closure, I received a voicemail from an unknown number. No voice. No breathing. Just a sound. Footsteps. Erratic. Fast. Back and forth. Recorded at night. And layered beneath it, barely audible, was a soft, wet chewing noise. I deleted the message. I changed my number. I left medicine entirely. I tell myself it ended there. But sometimes, when I'm alone, when the lights hum too loudly, when I pass long hallways with doors on both sides, I swear I hear running. If you're still listening, understand this. Not every horror story ends with death. Some end with understanding, too late to save anyone, but just in time to warn you. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to The Last Dose. These are not legends. These are cases. And I still have many left in my archives.